So,
Okay.
Camila, you're in charge. Diana, you're in charge whenever you want.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Alrighty.
Can you tell me if you can see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Diana, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Diana and I will be presenting The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. First, what do we know about Edgar? Well, Edgar was born in Boston, USA, in 1809 and died in Baltimore, USA in 1849. Yes. He, after dropping out of university and the army, he became one of the first writers of the time to make a living from publishing his stories and criticism. As you may remember, he worked at a newspaper. He also married his cousin Virginia, and they remained together until her death from a similar disease to tuberculosis. He also suffered from alcoholism and depression. It is said that he drank a lot, and he had much financial difficulties throughout his life, particularly after Virginia died. He always was poor, as it is said in her biographies. And also he is best known, or might be best known by The Raven, which was published in 1845. Now, regarding the social cultural context for the work, we have both wives, because Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven while his wife Virginia was ill with a disease quite similar to tuberculosis, and which was a disease that already had robbed him 3 family members of his. Then we also have Christianity. We have to remember that back then there was a dominant role of Christianity in the United States in 19th century, especially before Darwin's theory of evolution. And we also have then the Civil War's tensions before the tensions before the Civil War, because the period of time where when Poe was living, there were tensions between northern and southern states over slavery, states' rights, and westward expansion. And well, there was this fragile peace between slave states and free states that were coming undone. So we can say that the literary works might have been inspired by tales of horror and mysteries that Black people used to tell Edgar Allan Poe. And then we have another element that might have influenced, or we know that it influenced the literature of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes. In regards to the type of literature that Poe wrote, we can talk about the Gothic literature. It's important to mention that Poe was the one who brought Gothic literature to America, because Gothic literature rose with Romanticism in Britain in the late 18th century, and Poe then brought it to America. The Gothic literature dramatizes cultures that are plagued by poverty and slavery through characters afflicted with forms of insanity and melancholy, like very depressed ambiance. I don't know. Yes, environment, very sad, very low, etc. The Gothic literature also explores the dark side of human experiences, such as death, nightmares, ghosts, and haunted landscapes. As in as a conclusion from the Gothic literature, it says that it relies on haunting and mysterious narratives. There are a blur, the boundaries between what's real and what's not real. Um, it also says that Poe embraces the Gothic literature with his graphic violence and disturbing scenarios. And these two characteristics separate Poe from conservative and traditional characteristics of the romanticism style. Poe's tales are also flashes of the chaos that stir up within lonely narrators living at the brink of society. The characters from his novels are mainly poor people and castaways. Like they are just separated from the rest of the normal society or common society. Okay, now we have the plot of the summary. This, I want to mention that we used GIFs in here, but these GIFs are from an episode of from The Simpsons, where it was the first Halloween episode of The Simpsons, if I'm not mistaken, and they talked about the raven. So I hope you enjoy the GIFs. This poem is about a named person who was thoroughly examining a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore one big December night. Speaker was trying to escape from the despair of losing his lover called Lenore. However, there was a tapping at the door that disturbed him. He told himself that it was merely a visitor and nothing more. But when he opened the door, he saw only darkness and heard nothing but the word Lenore. And this word was an echo of course, his own word. Then, when he returned to his room, he heard a tapping again and thought that it was just wind outside his window. However, when he opened the window, a raven suddenly entered the room, perched upon a bust of Pallas that there was above the door of his room. Amused by the appearance of this bird, the narrator asked for the raven's name, but the bird only responded nevermore. Knowing that the raven could speak, the narrator asked the raven questions like if there was balm in Gilead and if he would see Lenore in heaven again. But the raven only replied nevermore. This reply left the narrator heartbroken and infuriated. Therefore, the narrator, now furious, demanded the raven to go back into the night and to leave him alone. But the raven said once again, nevermore, and he did not leave the bust of Pallas. Then the speaker continued to feel anguish for his loss, and he felt as if his soul would nevermore leave the raven's shadow. Are muted. Camila, we can hear you if you're talking.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So we have now the characters. First, the narrator. This was an unnamed man who might be considered a scholar because of his reading forgotten lore, which is forgotten literature and ancient literature. Well, he is reasonable, yet his logic and knowledge do not help him to recover from the impact of Lenore's death. So then his desperation leads him to emotional extremes, from sadness to near euphoria, and finally to depression. So we think that the Raven overthrows the narrator's mind. I mean, the narrator's rational mind. Then we have the Raven. The Raven is the bird that enters the narrator's house while the narrator is grieving over his last love, and lands upon the narrator's vast of palace. Then to everything the narrator says, the Raven responds with just one word, which is nevermore. And whether the Raven is supernatural being or a product of the narrator's imagination, for us is unclear. So in this way, we think that the poem creates a connection typical of Gothic literature between the subconscious and the supernatural. And then we have Lenore. Lenore, while she never actually appears in the poem and nothing is revealed about her, but her status as the narrator's beloved, her presence looms over the text, as the narrator cannot prevent himself from grieving her passing and wondering if he might be able to see her again in heaven. We think that this character might be representing the Poe's wife, because while Poe was writing this poem, Virginia was ill. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the setting. I please. Thank you. Now we have the setting. This poem begins at midnight in a bleak December in a typically Gothic setting. By bleak December, it means that it was a very depressing setting. The location also is a single room, richly furnished, and it has a fireplace with dying embers. The narrator finds himself studying a book in books of forgotten lore in an attempt to distract himself from his troubles. Speaking of the narrator, now we have this poem. We found that this poem is written in first person from the perspective of a nameless man. We believe, well, it is believed that this man could be referring to Edgar Allan Poe himself, or it could also be a fictional character, but it's most commonly thought that it is Poe himself, since the wife is also Lenore. It is believed to be his deceased wife. We also believe that the nameless man could be Edgar Allan Poe.
Now, regarding the poem's structure, The Raven is a highly musical composition. It has an A-B-C-B-B-B rhyme pattern, and it is composed of 18 stanzas of 6 lines each. So we have an example here. We have that the first line it finishes with weary, which has no other matching line. Then we have the second one that rhymes with the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. And we have the third one, which is another line that has no matching line. Now, regarding the rhyme, we have the figures of a speech. The first one would be rhyme. Here we have the words chatter and flatter. So we can read, open here I flank the chatter when with many a fleet and flatter. Then we have a metaphor. It says, and the raven never flitting, still sitting, on the pallid vast of palace just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. Here we think that the poet here, Edgar, is saying that a demon's eyes look like a raven's. So when you see them, we think that you may not know what is behind those eyes, and maybe this metaphor helps the reader to see the evilness in the beard, or the way that the narrator sees the evilness, sorry, in the beard, because this part of the poem was like by at the end of the poem. So the narrator thought that this birth was quite evil because it tortures him, and we think this is a way to portray that. And well, we were wondering because it says dreaming, because maybe like this picture, the eyes are like maybe frightening. You don't know what it's up to. I don't know. We think that. Then we had simile. Here, as you can see, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. So the author is comparing the living of the raven to the living of his hopes. We also have alliteration. Alliteration is used to create musical effects. So as we said, this poem is musical composition. Here, once upon a midnight dreary, while I ponder weak and weary. And then we have while I not nearly napping. And
Okay, then we have repetition. Repetition, as we all know, it's when a word is repeated all throughout the lines or the text. Here, the word that is repeated is said by the Raven. It is the word nevermore. Then we have hyperbole, which is when the narrator exaggerates a feeling. Here, the narrator exaggerates his disappointment of not finding Leonard tapping when he hears the tapping at the door. And it is seen in the line, back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. So with all my soul within me burning, we can see that Poe exaggerates the feeling of disappointment. Then we have personification, when it's a human feature. A human feature, it is given to a non-human element. And here we can see it in the line, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. And here we have the author gave the ability to the echo to speak, because when he murmured back the word Lenore, he murmured it like an exclamation. But the main character said it as a question. So it's like the echo answered his question, the main character's question. And it's obvious that an echo cannot answer. An echo only repeats. So that's why we think that he gave the characteristic. And then we have imagery, which is when it is to create images of feelings. And here the author skillfully uses to create images of the feelings that the main character was feeling, such as pain, horror, and grief. While we read the poem, we can picture how the main character was feeling. We can see it when he uses the sentences deep into that darkness peering. In the word darkness, he tried to give him the feeling of like exaggerated. Then we have when he says silent, but the silence was unbroken. And yeah, and it's also important to mention that imagery is seen all throughout the poem, because the point of this poem is to make us, I don't know if it's the point, but the poem in general makes us feel like there is this constant feeling of the a depressed feeling, like he said, it's a bleak feeling. It makes us feel like uneasy, probably. Yeah, and those are the figures of speech that we found. Then we have the point of view. This poem is told from the point of view of the narrators. It is in first person, which allows us, the readers, to track the progression of the main character from a feeling of weary scholar to grieving, to a grieving lover. When we say weary scholar, we mean that he's kind of exhausted or bored by all his learning. And yeah, that's mainly the point of view. Then we have the theme.
Okay. We thought about two themes. The first one, we say that there is death and the afterlife themes in throughout the poem. The Raven explores death. More specifically, this poem explores the effects of death on the living, such as grief, mourning, and memories of the deceased, as well as this issue that so often haunts those who have lost loved ones to death. So when we lost someone that we love, we wonder whether there is an afterlife in which we will be reunited with those who have died. So this is what happens throughout the poem. Sorry. This is what we think that happens throughout the poem. The narrators is constantly wondering, well, by the end of the poem, very much, if he will see or we will be reunited with Lenore on heaven. And we also have memory and loss. So often there is this idea that memory of the death are presented as positive, like a way for the deceased to continue to exist in the hearts and minds of those who remember them, and as a source of comfort for those who are still alive. However, this idea flips over throughout the Raven, because here the narrator is portraying the memories of his deceased lover as a painful and inescapable burden. He wants to not remember Lenore, but he cannot.
Okay, then we have the symbolism in the poem. The first symbolism, we only put the two main symbolisms that we found, which are the bust of Pallas, the first one. We believe that the bust of Pallas is a symbolism because, first of all, Pallas was the Greek goddess of wisdom, which could symbolize the main character's interest in learning, also his sanity, and even his rationality. When the raven comes inside the room and lands on the bust of Pallas, we can that could symbolize as if the raven was a threat to the main character's common sense and stability. And also, it could mean that the raven was a guide to the narrator's dementia due to his loneliness and loss, which leads us to the other symbolism, which is obviously the raven. We believe that the raven could symbolize death and omen of illness, because back then, in that period of time, it was very common to like have these beliefs that certain animals meant something more than being just animals. So the raven back then actually meant an omen of illness. That's why we believe that the author chose it. It also could symbolize death and sadness. And it could mean that it was a constant reminder of the loss and grief that the main character was going through. The raven, it's a symbol also of, I mean, it could be an arrogant intruder that is holding dominion over the narrator, sorry. And it's like a guide. The raven could symbolize that it's driving the main character closer and closer to insanity. And here we can see that it's connected with the bust of Pallas, because as the raven lands on the bust of Pallas, here it symbolizes that the raven is driving the main character closer and closer to dementia and making the main character lose his mind.
Well, given all these elements of the poem, we have concluded that the tone of the poem is dark and melancholic. The poet uses a vocabulary that creates an atmosphere of despair, and sadness throughout this literary work, and the tone becomes increasingly blue, as Diana said, and intense as the narrator descends into misery. And then there is this evolution of the narrator's thoughts and feelings. Well, the poem begins at midnight in December. So this is the last moment of a spent day in the final month of the year. So we think that internally and externally, it might be representing a time of death and decay. And even the dying fireplace embers reflect the moribund atmospheres that is in this poem. Also, the setting is a single room, so the narrator himself faces the time and local weak and weary, so he seems trapped in his richly furnished prison, and he hopes for the morning. So the return, that is the return of the light, and so the life. But all he can do is to grieve his dead love and feel the horror of his current situation.
Okay, we with Camila took the liberty to add some fun facts about the poem. And the first fact that we found, we called it parrot versus raven, because well, when Edgar Allan Poe was writing this poem, he wanted someone to repeat the word nevermore several times throughout the poem. But he thought that if it came from a person, it would be kind of monotonous. So he then thought of a non-reasoning creature to utter this word. And the first creature that he thought of was a parrot, because, as we all know, a parrot has the capacity, I mean, the ability to repeat words said by a human being. However, he thought that a parrot was not like it did not fit the theme of this poem. Therefore, he chose a raven, which had similar capacities of a parrot, and it would be more appropriate given the melancholic tone of the poem.
Yes, and then we have the other fact, which is why he chose the word nevermore. He considered this word a melancholic one, as when hearing it, because it finds echo in the melancholy heart that the narrator has. So it is also demonstrated throughout the text that the narrator demonstrates to have a self-torture tendency. So as he will ask the raven queries related to his deceased love, knowing the possible answer of nevermore, this word would torture him even more than he was before. And thus, when the bird answers, the raven provides the narrator more sorrow. So this word would emphasize or trigger the narrator to be more mad or to become mad. And well, those two facts we selected them from the essay that Paul published 1 year after. No, sorry, before. After.
After, yes, he published this essay after he wrote the Raven,
Yes,
because
1 year after.
there were some people who were doubting the originality of the poem. Therefore, he wanted to explain his creative process while of writing this poem. That's why he published this essay.
Yeah, this essay is called The Philosophy of Composition.
And to create discussion among us, we wrote 2 questions regarding the poem, which are, what do you think is Poe's purpose here in characterizing madness? So this one is for, if you want to answer, of course, you are welcome to discuss this question with us. Or Camila, if you want to add something regarding this question.
Yes.
I have an opinion.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rosie.
See who's wanted to talk. I can see. So go ahead.
Okay, so I think that the purpose here is that I think the author wanted to portray how real madness can feel for people, and how these mental health diseases or issues are feel so real and are so valid for the people who are in this fight or troubled. And I think that the way in which he made a raven play that role meant that it was something real. I think that's what he wanted to express, the realness of the feeling and this sadness, grief, and all those strong feelings that people experiment while losing someone or having big troubles, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, when I discussed it with Camila, I was also thinking that the necessity of characterize of the raven, it was because it could mean like Poe's mental illness, like his depression after losing his loving wife or lover. I don't and it is important that maybe Poe could have this, because he locked himself in his room after he lost Lenore. And the raven, the arrival of the raven, it could mean like the beginning of his mental illness, or maybe when his depression became more tangible or more extreme. That's what so I think similar to Rocio.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same because I thought that maybe the author here was trying to to clear to clear his mind, maybe because of the situations that he was going through, because he had lost both of his mothers both of his fathers who rejected him. He was having his wife deceased. I mean, not deceased, but ill, and he was kind of alone because he had no friends, and maybe he wanted to portray this sadness, and maybe he had these troubles in his mind, maybe because of mental illness, and he portrayed all this through his writing. So maybe that is one another reason because he portrayed this madness. Besides wanting to people be represented by this poem, maybe.
Shall we go to the second question? The second question, it says, who do you think will leave the room first? Okay, who do you think will leave first?
The Raven or the narrator?
The Raven or the main character? Because in my opinion, I think that neither of them will leave the room. I think that for the Raven to exist, it needs the main character. Like, not obviously it needs them, but I feel like they I think the Raven needs the main character and the main character needs the Raven, because I feel like the Raven, we don't even know if the Raven is real. So if the Raven is not, it's inside the main character's head. Therefore, the Raven will not be able to live. And I think Poe will be, I mean, Poe, the main character will be so like, I don't know how to say it, but he will be like, he will not want to lose maybe to the Raven. Therefore, he will not leave the room because he does not want the Raven to be the boss of him, something like that. We have Miguel said that they are one and the same. None of them will leave the room before the other. Exactly. Thank you, Miguel.
Yes, because as we thought with Diana, the main character was kind of falling asleep when he was reading the Forgotten Love. So then the Raven appears. So maybe that is why that is why we think that the Raven might be part of the imagination of the narrator. So we do not know if the Raven is real. So that is why the Raven exists, because it's part of the main character. Well, do you have any questions? Comment?
I do. What's your personal evaluation of the poem? Did you like the poem? In what way? What's your own perception of it?
I really liked it. I mean, I had never had the opportunity to read it. It has always been like there on my list. But now that I read it, I I like the way the musical composition. I liked it very much. I don't know, and as I said before, it made me feel a little bit uneasy, but I would definitely read it again.
I agree with Diana. I didn't read it before this opportunity. I think that he was quite creative with his writing in this poem, because he had a lot of figure of speech included in this poem, and that also helped a lot to read it. it was quite easy and entertaining because it is not too long, so it is easy to read it and keep up with what is going on in the poem. And also the themes, I really liked the themes. I really like to reflect on those type of themes, so I really liked this poem.
And it is also helpful to maybe to create a discussion about mental health, because I do believe that the deep down this poem could mean a lot to that discussion, could add a lot to that discussion.
Yeah.
This question for everyone, actually not except the presenters. Why is the Raven a good representative of Gothic literature? What elements are part of this poem that make the poem, the work, a good representation of Gothic literature? This question can be answered by anyone except the book report presenters.
Maybe the darkness of the tone in which this poem is written and the themes that it explores, like death and afterlife mysteriousness, and also the oppositional topics for the time, because when someone died or you had strong feelings, religious was like the main source of explanation. So this Gothic literature comes to talk about the other way in which you can see things, totally different to religious and religious explanations for this phenomena. I think that gives it this Gothic turn to the poem.
May I say something?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the Raven, as it is black, maybe it can create a sort of imagination of something bad, or something related to death, and also because they are near the graves, maybe they tend to be near the graves, and that makes them like more related to death.
Ladies, you mentioned some symbols present. You talked about the raven, and you talked about the bust of Pallas, and there are several allusions in the poem that remain like covered. Do you think that we need to know about these allusions to enjoy the poem? I'm talking about, for example, to know who Pallas was, to understand some words connected with dark forces or black magic, to understand the references about the Pluto, right, the god of the underworld, the reference to evil or devil, evil forces. Is it necessary for the reader to know all of this, or to have all this background to actually enjoy the poem? What do you think?
I don't think that it's necessary to know to enjoy it, but I do believe that that once you read it, maybe it could you would want to know like more about it. because you will notice that there are several like allusions to something that it's bigger than just what it means in the poem. So I think that after you read it, you would investigate it, and then you will read it again. It may mean something more that than when you read it the first time.
Yeah, well, well, personally, I had some words that I didn't know about, like Gilead, I think that is it is pronounced, which means heaven, like the garden of heaven, I think. So I didn't know about that. So when I read it in the poem, I was like, what is this? But I think that back then, the readers would know what this poet is talking about because they were very religious. So maybe these allusions would be understood by them. Maybe not for us because I am not a very religious person. So I don't know about these topics. I knew a little bit about palace, but not other allusions to Christianity. So I think back then the readers would know and would enjoy or be scared because of this poem, maybe because of that. They were religious.
I think Martin wrote something in the chat to comment, I think.
Yes, he said that ravens are carrion birds too. They flock to dead things, thus are regarded as bringers of death and ill omens. Yeah. I was going to say also that when Poe wrote the essay, I think it could mean to also explain the several hidden messages that were inside the poem, probably.
Do you think that necessarily this state of mind, the depression that he was under, or he was going through, had an influence in the poem that he wrote?
Yeah, I think so. Because Poe has had such a difficult life. He lost both his mother's, his biological mother, his adoptive mother, and he had been through a lot. So I think that deep down, all his dark feelings, he put them on this poem and all his stories, because all the stories have like this certain feeling of darkness. So I think he did pour all his feelings in his work.
At least my final question, which suggestions would you give your classmates if they feel or they are appealed by Gothic literature? Which elements from Gothic literature they should consider to include in their literary work? You know, the one that they are going to write or start writing at some point. Which elements from the Gothic literature should be considered or included in a literary work?
Well, Gothic literature includes elements such as supernatural beings or supernatural like thoughts. I mean, it includes a lot of supernatural, like black magic, maybe elements related to death and afterlife. So I think when writing, we should consider, or you should consider, my classmates, those elements that are death, loss, grief. So it's like everything like is positive, you should turn it to negative emotions, feelings.
Yes, like try to make it, try to make the reader feel sad, like feel the darkness or maybe sadness,
Yeah.
suffering from your work.
Also, there is a like a suspense throughout the poem, at least here, because I remember that Paul used a lot of repetition. So when he used it, it built tension because you didn't know what was coming then. Because when the narrator was reading, there is a tapping at the door. Then there is a tapping at the window, and then you don't know what it is that it is tapping. So yeah, and there is a suspense also, I think, in Gothic literature.
Yeah, don't forget the haunted landscapes or everything that's related to maybe that. Think as if you're writing something for Halloween.
Hmm.
It makes me feel something like that.
All right, that's those are really good suggestions. Maybe a good experiment for some who haven't written anything connected with Gothic literature. It's difficult to know whether the Raven was real or not. That's up to us as readers, and particularly in the state of mind that the narrator was. It's always difficult for the reader to judge whether what's going on is real or just part of the narrator's imagination. So it's also another element to consider. Always put this suspense in between the lines and let the reader decide. I really appreciate your book report. Poes, I think we are closing a cycle of romantic works, but mainly focused on Edgar Allan Poe. If you consider only we had The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne and Moby Dick by Melville, and the rest I think were only Poe's works. I may be mistaken, but I have that feeling.
No, you're right.
So, okay, so next time we'll see each other virtually, right? It's supposedly on the Monday after the recess, right? Probably 10:50. I'm going to send a message to confirm that. Barbara? Barbara?
Sorry, I made a mistake.
Ah, okay.
Teacher,
So,
I have a question. I'm sorry.
who's I?
I think Kata? No, Constanza. Connie.
Constanza.
Yeah.
Okay, Constanza?
I don't know if you already talked about this at the beginning of the class because I was a few minutes late. But
No, we haven't. The forum, right?
About the forum.
Yes, we haven't.
Okay. So I would like to know what is going to happen with that.
Okay, I had a brief conversation with Constanza about the forums. I closed the first forum and I also closed the second one, assuming that there were not going to be more posts. But as Constanza mentioned, some of you did not have enough time to make posts. We're talking about the previous period, the one before Romanticism, right? So I told her, and now I'm telling you all that I'm going to open the second forum. I'm not going to open the first one because I consider that enough time has gone, right, or passed, in order to post something about sinners in the hands of an angry God. and also it's not like it's kind of untimely. So I'm going to open the second forum, the one dealing with revolutionary age, okay? And I'm going to open that forum, and I'm going to leave as the final date for the second forum, the June the 21st, right? June the 21st. Now, remember that the idea is to post while we're talking about while we're dealing with that specific literary period, to make it more efficient, not efficient, more enriching in terms of asynchronic discussion, okay? And the third forum, the one dealing with romanticism, I think it's still open, but I'm going to move the date from June the 7th up to June the 21st as well. Okay. And there's going to be one last forum, a fourth forum, which is connected with naturalism and realism. Okay. And that's going to be until the last day in which we're having classes. Okay, that's about the the forums. Yes.
Thank you,
I don't know.
Professor.
No problem. Any other comments or questions?
Professor,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the second book report.
Mm-hmm.
That if we have classes on Monday, then we have to present, right? The second book report.
Exactly.
Which
Because we're.
should, yes, sorry.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
Yes. So we haven't decided yet because it should be presenting Sister Carrie, Huck, Finn, I think, and a rose for Emily. So we all three groups should be ready by that Monday, or I don't know. What do you think?
We're talking about The Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Old Man and the Sea, Great Gatsby, and The Grapes of Wrath. I as far as I know, there are five groups. I don't know if there's any change. If you can update me on that. Still 5 groups or 5 book reports? No. Sorry. An occurrence. I'm reading the reports for the following literary period. An occurrence. Sister Carrie, Huck Finn, Rose for Emily. 4. Yes. Unless we agree right now, who's going on the Monday session? I'm going to do it randomly.
Yes,
Professor, me with Daniela have Huckleberry Finn, so we have to present on Monday. We want to present on Monday.
Professor.
Okay.
Professor,
yes, ma'am.
Can we present on Monday, because on Wednesday we have to do something related to our thesis at 8:30 in the morning, so we couldn't present on Wednesday.
Who's we? I mean, but why do you have to? Right, but okay. So we can leave Huckleberry Finn and Sister Carrie on the Monday session. Is that all right?
Oh, okay.
Yes, Professor.
All right, and Wednesday,
yes.
a rose for Emily and an occurrence at Old Creek Bridge. Is that all right for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the plan for Monday session and Wednesday session. And the following session, which is going to be on Friday, right after, we're talking about, let's put a date here. We're talking about, when we say Monday session, we're talking about the June the 15th. That's Monday, after the recess, June the 15th. And Wednesday, we're talking about June the 17th. That's like regular 2-hour classes. And then Friday the 19th, we have 1 hour, right? 1 hour. So that's something that to consider, because the following literary period should be modernism, and at least one of you, particularly 3 and 4, A Rose for Emily. Let me double check. A Rose for Emily, number 3, and Occurrence at Oak Creek Bridge would be number 4. At least one group is going to go on Friday, and that's my concern. I think I'm sharing with you the syllabus for the course, and
Yes.
these, thank you. These are the presentation for the realist and naturalistic period. In number 1 and 2, Huckleberry Finn Carey for Monday session, and 3 and 4 for Wednesday session. The following Friday, we're talking about Friday the 19th, we should start the following literary period, which is modernism. And my point is, it could not be the group presenting An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, or the group presenting the book report on A Rose for Emily, because they're going to be the ones doing it on Wednesday. So for the Friday session, it should be the group presenting Huckleberry Finn, or the group presenting Sister Carrie, considering that you're giving your presentation on Monday. That would be one option. The other option would be that you could, I don't know. I'm just thinking a lot here on.
I've got a question about
Yes.
our book, because you have been saying that the Rose for Emily is for the realist period, but is that book is of the modernist period.
Yeah, it's in between, actually. It's in between, because it takes some elements from the Civil War, or the antebellum, the period before the Civil War, and also elements that are considered the Reconstruction that comes after the Civil after the Civil War in the United States. Yes. So that's why it takes elements. So it's like a book that I would call it in between the two literary periods. Remember that literary periods do not end and then the following starts. There's some overlapping. There's always some overlapping, because that one period is usually a reaction towards the ideas that were considered the ones true in the period, in the prior period. So it's like an in-between book. So
that's good. I didn't know that.
So my point is, in this arranging the book reports, is that on June the 19th, the Friday session, either the group giving the book report on Huckleberry Finn, or the one giving the report on Sister Carrie, on Monday the 15th, should be ready to give a book report on the 19th. The other option would be to reschedule that class to the following week, or the one giving the presentation record it, and then we can all watch it. We can all watch the presentation asynchronically, like, whatever time we are available. Because I'm quoting here one of the comments that had to do. I think one of you said what about recording the presentations? Okay, so we need to decide on that. I'm a bit concerned about the June 19th session because we need to arrange it
Professor?
beforehand. Yes, sir.
We, with Catalina and Mauricio, we volunteer for the 19th.
Okay, and which one is yours, Martin?
The Great Gatsby.
The Great Gatsby, all right. So the Great Gatsby is going to be one, and that's going to be on June the 19th. Thank you so much, Martin.
No problem.
Alrighty. So are we all good? Are we all good in terms of the programming or the planning of the sessions?
Professor?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
About the presentations that you said that could be recorded, those presentations, which presentations could be recorded? The ones on Monday 15 or the ones that come after?
We were considering and evaluating some solutions to make up the Wednesday class, this June the 3rd class, and some of the ideas that came up during the conversation or discussion was to record the class, to record the book report. And I think that's an option that I would consider, but without skipping the discussions component, the run of questions.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, we would gather to have a discussion, regardless the group, even if the group recorded this the book report. That's something that I would not like to miss. The class discussion or the questions that may arise, particularly for from students who have not read the book. So that option is also available if you want to take it. You can record your presentation before. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Alrighty. So I'm going to stop recording now, and I wish you you have a good day.
You too.
You too, Professor.